Some people move through life collecting interests the way others collect debt. A new obsession takes over, weeks disappear into it, notebooks fill, tabs multiply, and then something shifts. Not because you are lazy, not because you lack discipline, but because your mind is already reaching for the next pattern before you have finished processing the last one. Maybe you have seen it in small moments. A dozen tabs open, a half-written idea sitting on the screen, something you meant to return to but never quite did. From the outside, it looks like chaos. From the inside, it feels like something you cannot fully explain. There is a notebook somewhere, maybe physical, maybe digital, that has the beginning of something in it. A few pages of research into fermentation, some sketches from when architecture felt like the answer, a half-finished course on behavioral economics that you genuinely meant to complete. You did not abandon these things because you lost interest. You abandoned them because something else arrived and your attention moved toward it, the way a compass needle moves toward north, not by decision, but by pull. This has probably happened more times than you can count, and at some point, the pattern stopped feeling like curiosity and started feeling like evidence of something, like an inability to commit, like a character flaw dressed up as enthusiasm. You may not have said that out loud, but the thought has been there, and this is where most people misread what is happening. There is a particular discomfort that arrives when someone asks what you do, and you realize the honest answer would take too long and sound too scattered. So you edit. You pick the most recent thing or the most respectable thing, and you offer that instead. The rest gets quietly left out. Think about what that editing actually looks like. The person who spent 2 years deep in photography, then moved into product management, then started writing. And when someone at a dinner party asks what they do, they say, "I work in tech." Not wrong, just incomplete in a way that feels slightly false the moment it leaves their mouth. From the outside, a life with many directions can look like a life without one. Most social structures, job applications, LinkedIn profiles, dinner party introductions are not built to hold complexity. They want a lane. They want one clear answer. So people who do not have one learn to simplify, to compress, to present a version of themselves that fits the available box. What gets lost in that compression is hard to name, but you have probably felt it. The slight falseness of a neat answer to a question that does not have one. At some point, you might have started to wonder if something about the way your mind works simply does not fit the way the world is structured. The belief tends to form quietly, over years, that serious people specialize, that mastery means narrowing, that the ones who are truly good at something got there by choosing it exclusively and staying. This is not an unreasonable belief. There is real evidence for it in certain contexts, but for people whose minds move across domains, who find that learning one thing genuinely changes how they understand another, this model of mastery creates a problem. It means that no matter how much you know, no matter how deeply you have gone into any single area, the breadth itself reads as evidence of shallowness. But here is what that model misses. Depth is not only vertical. Some kinds of understanding can only be reached by moving sideways, by carrying knowledge from one field into the territory of another and seeing what happens when they meet. The person who only goes deep in one direction never finds out what lives at the intersections. Researchers who study expertise and performance have started paying attention to a pattern that does not fit the traditional model. They sometimes describe it as an M-shaped skill profile. A person who develops real depth in more than one domain and whose value emerges from the connections between them. This is not just general curiosity. Something more specific is happening. Cognitive research on analogical thinking suggests that the ability to take a mental model from one field and apply it to a completely different one is rare, and it tends to show up in people who have spent real time in genuinely unrelated areas. And this is where the pattern starts to change meaning. What looked like an inability to commit to one thing may have been the mind doing something more structurally complex, not scattering, mapping. Consider what it actually means to understand both the psychology of decision-making and the mechanics of interface design, or both the history of urban planning and the dynamics of online communities, or both classical music theory and the structure of organizational behavior. A specialist in either field arrives at the intersection with one set of tools. The person who has lived in both arrives with two, and with something harder to name: an instinct for how the two systems rhyme. There is a reason some of the most influential thinkers were not pure specialists. Darwin moved between biology, geology, and economics. Ada Lovelace understood both poetry and mathematics at a time when almost no one moved between those worlds. The insight that made them distinct did not come from going deeper into one field. It came from what happened when two fields met inside the same mind. Most multi-interested people never make this comparison. They assess themselves field by field, measuring their depth in each area against people who have spent entire careers there. Measured that way, they will always come up short. But that is not the right comparison. The question is not whether you are the best guitarist or the best programmer. The question is how many people exist who are genuinely both, and what that combination makes possible that neither alone could reach. You may not have thought about it that way before, but the combination you carry is probably less common than you realize. The pressure to specialize did not come from nowhere. It came from a system, built across the industrial era, that needed people to perform defined, repeatable functions within stable structures. Schools sorted people into tracks. Careers formed around narrow roles. The question, "What do you do?" assumed the answer would be singular and permanent. That system rewarded depth in one direction because that was what it required at the time. And over time, it became something else. Not just a structure, but a story. A story about what kind of person you were supposed to become. The voices that carried this message were rarely malicious. A teacher trying to focus scattered energy, a parent worried about stability, a performance review that praised focus and flagged everything else. The message arrived through ordinary channels, but it landed somewhere deeper than intended. And for a long time, it became the standard you quietly measured yourself against. What is worth noticing is this: the system was not wrong for its moment. It was simply not built for yours. That notebook with the unfinished fermentation research, the abandoned course, the 3-week obsession with cartography that dissolved when something else appeared. Seen through the old model, that pattern looks like a liability, evidence of someone who cannot sustain commitment, someone who starts things and leaves them. But that is not the only way to read it. A mind that moves across domains is not a mind that fails to go deep. It is a mind that goes deep in multiple directions and carries what it finds. The abandoned projects are not failures of discipline. They are traces of a search for intersections, for combinations, for the specific places where two unrelated things begin to illuminate each other. The behavior was never the problem. It was the architecture. And the world taking shape now, complex, cross-disciplinary, full of problems that do not belong to any single field, may be the first environment in a long time that is actually built for it.